The title of the show, The Gluten Free Lie, got a lot of people riled up, and some people thought that the whole gluten-free thing was a scam based on the title of the show. But tell us, you kind of already did, but tell us what the gluten-free lie really is.
The gluten-free lie is that, if we go back and we look at the history of where we came up with the diagnosis for celiac disease and how grain actually created the problem in the first place, we go back to 1952. There was a German physician by the name of William Dickey, and he was treating patients with celiac disease in the hospital during World War II. And back then, of course, this is before we knew what caused celiac disease. And what he found was when the war started, there was no grain available to the children in the hospital. They all had remission. They all healed. And when the war ended and grain became available again, they all got sick again, and he was the first doctor that really observed that and wrote and published a paper on it. And the staple grains in that region of the world are wheat, barley, rye, and oats. And so, the kind of commonality with what most people call gluten-free is that wheat, barley, rye, and sometimes oats, and sometimes you'll see gluten-free oats in the grocery store. You'll hear people talk about because they were grown in France and because they're not cross-contaminated or whatever the case might be, that they're actually gluten-free. And that's the lie. The lie is that gluten is a family of proteins. It's not just one protein. It's not a singular term, but it is a family of proteins. Glutens, by definition, are the proteins that are inside the seeds of grass, and the seeds of grass are grains, right? So we've got corn as a grain, and rice as a grain, and millet, and teff, and triticale, and sorghum. All these things that everybody's calling gluten-free, that's the lie. And if you follow and you look at studies that follow patients with celiac disease, the average person with celiac disease, and the reason we know this about celiac, because this is what gets studied, is people with celiac disease, 92% of them don't heal on a traditional gluten-free diet, which is just wheat, barley, and rye-free. But the other problem is you've got 92% of them don't heal, but on average, they will go on to develop 7 autoimmune diseases in their lifetime. And so if you take those statistics, which to me are quite alarming, and you say, okay, well, if going wheat, barley, and rye-free were the answer, then these people should get better, right? And so what we find and what other doctors have found is that taking patients grain-free, no corn, no rice, and those are the two biggest substitutes, although sorghum is really getting ready to explode in the gluten-free community, although it's not really gluten-free. It has glutens in it. It's just that they're not considered the traditional gluten. The original gluten discovered in 1952, which is called alpha-gliadin, was discovered on a study done in only 10 patients, and that's kind of what everybody's stuck to. And so the crazy thing about it, Sean, is that I can pull out at least 25 research studies where we studied the glutens in corn and we studied the glutens in other so-called safe grains, and they show damage every time we study them. And some people's argument is, well, it's because in the study the grain itself was cross-contaminated, like the corn was cross-contaminated with wheat, and that's why it showed damage. But the reality of the matter is, it doesn't matter whether it might have been cross-contaminated with wheat or not, because you're buying products on the market that are cross-contaminated 41% of the time. So you're playing nutritional roulette every time you buy a packaged quote-unquote gluten-free product that's corn or rice or some other grain-based, because not only do you run the risk for cross-contamination, but there are other glutens in these products that don't get the respect they deserve.